All right, let's get to our top story this morning. Pete Hegseth says he will be back on Capitol Hill today to meet with Republican senators as he tries to salvage his bid for defense secretary. It will be his fourth straight day on the Hill amid mounting allegations of sexual assault, alcohol abuse, and other misconduct. He told CBS News yesterday that he had spoken to President-elect Donald Trump, who told him to keep fighting. One of his key meetings yesterday was with Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa. She is a combat veteran who is also a sexual assault survivor. She gave little insight about her sit-down with Hegseth. The Democratic senator was very blunt about where the former Fox News host stands with lawmakers. Here first is the exchange Senator Ernst had with reporters, followed by the assessment from Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal.
Can you summarize it for us?
It was a very frank, thorough discussion.
Senator, will you support Mr. Hegseth's nomination?
It was a frank and thorough conversation.
Did he ask you for your vote specifically?
Thank you.
When you met with Matt Gaetz, you said he brought up some of the allegations against him. Did Pete Hegseth bring up any of these things?
It was a very thorough conversation.
And also, Frank.
Any of your concerns? Did he meet any of your concerns?
Keep walking, Elliot. Guys need a pathway. Need to be able to walk. Need to be able to walk. Any chance you're up for consideration as defense secretary, Senator?
I've talked to 5 to 10 Republicans who have said to me they're just waiting for the right moment to say no to Pete Hegseth, and for very good reasons.
Why do you think so few Republicans, none by my count, have been willing to come out and say they will definitively not support this nominee?
Nobody wants to defy Donald Trump if you're a Republican. The power of the presidency, not to mention this president-elect and what the retribution might be, I think is pretty daunting. And so I think Republicans are reluctant to step forward and be the first one. But I think privately they're much readier to advise the president that the better part of wisdom would be to urge withdrawal of this nomination. I'd be surprised if we're still talking about Hegseth at the end of the week or by Monday.
So a couple of things. Senator Blumenthal telling us actually what's going on in the Republican caucus. Also, my contacts in the Republican conference. Of course, I could tell everybody that if you would like, and then they'd never talk to me again. I could do that.
No.
But let me tell you, Willie, they're saying basically the same thing, which is he's not going to make it through. There just aren't enough people to vote for him. And I will say, the meeting that was the most important to them yesterday was the Joni Ernst meeting for a lot of reasons. She's been a champion of women in the military. She has talked about being sexually harassed herself. That was a meeting they were hoping that he would be able to get through with her support. And I must say, it was a frank and a thorough conversation, is the Southern equivalent of, well, bless her heart. Because as one Republican said, you know, he's not going to make it, said he needed to hit a grand slam. He may have hit a triple yesterday, but too late. It's just not enough. And I'm hearing word that he may be going down to Mar-a-Lago. And it still looks like 1, 2, or 3 people, including Ron DeSantis, or Joni Ernst, who may actually get this position.
Yeah, hearing the same thing, I think you're right that Senator Blumenthal was giving voice to Republicans who don't feel like they can say that out loud at this point, that he's just not going to make it. That exchange between Senator Ernst and Garrett Haake, frank and thorough conversation, tells you a lot. There wasn't a lot of praise in her comments about Pete Hegseth. Now, he's saying the right things in the halls of the Capitol, saying these were great meetings. They were frank and thorough conversations. But in other places, like on social media, he's saying, I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to never back down. The left is afraid of me. The left is afraid of what Donald Trump wants to bring to the military and to this country. So showing, I guess, for Donald Trump, one last gasp of that fighting spirit. But as Senator Blumenthal points out, it looks at this moment like there are enough quiet Republican votes against him that he may not make it. Let's bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale, who's been up on the Hill chasing those senators around as well. Ali, what are you hearing about this potential nominee?
I think your conversation is really capturing the tone on Capitol Hill right now. There does seem to be this air of inevitability. We felt it, sort of a mood shift in the halls of Congress happening earlier in the week on Monday when Hegseth came back from the Thanksgiving recess and continued with the meetings that he was having with senators who are taking this advise and consent process, of course, quite seriously. But what we're watching, I think, and while the Gates example was the first nomination that we saw sort of start and then stop when Gates's nomination itself was pulled, I don't know that it's the right example because of the very specific profile that Gates cuts on Capitol Hill. The fact that he didn't have very many friends from within the House Republican Conference to sort of back him up with senators, the fact that he had sort of this long string of controversies, the ethics report, of course, still following him. Maybe we'll end up seeing something happen today on Capitol Hill as the Ethics Committee meets once again to figure out whether or not they're going to release this report. But the Gates example is not, I think, the right one. The Hegseth nomination is its own specific case, in large part because this trail of controversies that we still are seeing reported on. I mean, he was having to defend against serious allegations of sexual misconduct well before Courtney and the rest of our NBC News team was able to put forward a very detailed report about concerns at Fox News over his drinking habits. The fact that he's now going into these meetings with senators and having conversations promising them that he won't be drinking on the job if he's given this defense secretary role, it gives us a sense of the way that these conversations are going. And they're not focused from a policy and leadership perspective on past things that he said about women serving in the military, for example. Instead, they are focused on details of his character. And those are the sorts of things that are harder to explain away on Capitol Hill. And so I think we're watching in real time. Let's consider this the first test of how the Senate is going to react to a problematic nominee that, for now, has the president-elect's backing, and watching the way that they are maneuvering, not publicly, not airing their grievances on other networks or in the halls with reporters, unfortunately. Instead, what they're doing is a quiet signaling game, saying in the halls that it's a frank and thorough conversation, but what's really happening is a between-the-lines reading, and our unofficial whip count even, Willie, puts this at least 6 Republican senators at this point who are likely no's. That's how we're going to watch the Senate, it seems, maneuver in a Trump Washington. Maybe not saying no to the president-elect to his face, but certainly signaling it behind the scenes.
Yeah, Ali, you're right. Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi came out of his meeting with Pete Hegseth and said, I got a pledge from Pete Hegseth that he would not drink while he's a Secretary of Defense. That's kind of where things are. And we do have to underline, as you said, Pete Hegseth has said, not as a one-off flippant comment, but in his books and in different interviews, that he does not believe women should serve in combat. That does not sit well, obviously, with Senator Joni Ernst, who served in combat. So if he is pushed to the side over the next few days, what is looking like the likeliest next choice? Could it be Senator Ernst, given her background? Is it, in fact, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, who's been floated by several media outlets talking to people around Donald Trump? What does the next choice look like up on the Hill?
And that's what I've actually had senators say to me in the past, on background, even just yesterday, saying it's not so much that they think that the focus should remain on Hegseth. Many people are viewing his nomination as done, whether or not he's officially been pulled yet or not. The fact that you've got a list of names kind of waiting in the wings, also imagine how awkward it is, not just to have a meeting that you know is going to be tense with a senator, but to also have that senator be on a list of names that could replace you. Frank and thorough, I think, is the nicest way. I love the comparison to saying it's a bless your heart moment, because it really is. When you look at the list of names, you see, of course, DeSantis is the one that I think many people were initially drawn to. But Bill Hagerty, the senator from Tennessee, he has been consistently on this list of names of people that Trump seems to want to get into the cabinet in whatever position. Of course, a former ambassador, now a senator himself. I do think that there is a view on Capitol Hill that certainly Senator Ernst, Senator Hagerty, these are people who are respected and could be confirmed in bipartisan fashion. I think that Governor DeSantis, someone who knows the Hill but might have a little bit of a taller order, sort of explaining some of the things that he's done in Florida and how that might apply to a role at the Defense Department. And then, of course, Michael Waltz is someone who does seem to have the respect not only of his House colleagues, but in a sense that it could translate to the other side of the Capitol. I do think that there is a sense, much like with Pam Bondi, that the reception to whoever comes next will be much more palatable and potentially even bipartisan once it actually gets there. But look, once you start saying, OK, I'm going to pull these nominees because people don't like the profile of the person that I put in to disrupt this agency, that then becomes, you know, do you want to make that a pattern? We know that Trump doesn't like backing down from things like that. I mean, when they start making the first move to pull people, that could be a sign that, you know, they are open to pulling people who are controversial in the future.
Right. We certainly have seen that already. NBC's Ali Vitale, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Jonathan O'Meara. So, New York Times article this morning, you look through it. It adds to his list of concerns specifically. First of all, we have the sexual misconduct, including rape allegations in a police report. You've got the public drunkenness that came out yesterday, NBC News. And then you have financial mismanagement. So these are the numbers that the New York Times brought out today. He went to Vets for Freedom. They had an $8.7 million budget in 2008. $8.7 million. By 4 years later, by 2012, it was in debt. And then, as the New York Times said, it, quote, fizzled out. He then was at Concerned Vets for America, who, as the Times said, continually spent more money than it took in. And then the last year he was there, it was $37,000 in debt. That's for these two smaller vets organizations. And then you add on top of that, forget the financial mismanagement. Then on top of that, you have the New Yorker piece that talks about the whistleblower complaints of his activities while he was there. So sexual misconduct, public drunkenness, financial mismanagement, these whistleblower reports, and all of that is on top of the concerns that a lot of Republicans have that he just doesn't have the qualification to be Secretary of Defense. I've got to say, as Ali and other people are reporting, this looks like, you know, a failed PR attempt yesterday as sort of a last gasp. But it looks like the Trump transition team is already ready to move on.